Many great tales are founded upon a humble beginning. That is, if that humble beginning can be found.
You can guarantee you're going to get a bunch of reviews for the Plucky Squire that almost completely miss the point. This one's not trying to be a work of art, although arguably it almost achieves it. It's trying to take whoever's playing the game and immerse them in a fantastical world that makes you forget where you are. And I'd argue that the team at All Possible Futures and founders James Turner and Jonathan Biddle have done exactly that. Quite the departure for James, who was at Game Freak before, but not entirely without irony that he's managed to make a game that truly appeals to all ages. A plucky move indeed. But how is it all on the Nintendo Switch? And are you about to become a bookworm? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. The Plucky Squire is the main character in his own story series. He lives in the land of Mojo, guided by the pretty damn cool Moonbeard, and joined by his couple of pals, Violet, a trainee witch, and Thrash, a mountain troll. Every story needs an antagonist, and that role is filled by the evil wizard Humgrump. Now Humgrump is well and truly fed up, mainly because he can never beat the Plucky Squire. It's quite literally written, and he knows it when he finds the storybook. And with that in mind, he finally comes up with a plan he thinks is going to be enough to do away with the Plucky Squire once and for all. Now I vividly remember on my 5th birthday watching Honey I Shrunk the Kids, which released on the same day, being absolutely fascinated with this microscopic world and wondering exactly what it would be like to go around and explore my toys. A few years later we had Toy Story, which kind of answered that question. And the answer, as I expected, was flipping amazing, but also a little terrifying. The Plucky Squire deals with many fourth wall breaking elements. It takes place within a book, as well as the real world. The real world elements are based on the house of a young boy who's obsessed with the Squire. He spends his time doodling and drawing him, and one of its biggest strengths are the way they carry that creativity into the actual gameplay narrative. You'll start out within the pages of the book. When you transition from one area to another, a page turns. Sometimes on the ground you'll see small pieces of text. It won't take long until you realise that these can often be dislodged. You'll have to switch around words to make the right sequence to solve various small puzzles. Now with each turn of the page, the Squire is introduced to new gameplay mechanics. There are some similarities here to early Zelda games. You have a small sword, you can do a spin attack, and fire like a boomerang once unlocked, all of which is available at a small shop. Before you do any of this, you will get to choose whether you play the adventure mode or story being much easier, and you'll also find a number of accessibility options. If you have younger children who are going to play, you can basically make them invincible if you want, and make many other aspects of the game more simple. I'm really pleased to see these options. I know some people, for whatever reason, don't like it when there's accessibility, but for those who want to use them, crack on. I actually like the fact that the Plucky Squire is moderately difficult. Don't get me wrong, it's not Bloodborne, but there are a couple of moments of challenge in there. Now while it's initially quite linear, seeing you move between the pages of the book, solving the occasional small puzzles, and honestly, if it had carried on like that, I would have been a touch disappointed. It would have just been too safe. Now thankfully that's not the case. It throws in a few strange boss fights, and kicks you out of the pages of the book. I won't spoil why or how, but you end up being able to hop in and out of the book, and that's when things get really creative. As far as gameplay mechanics go, it will see you carrying those words into the real world and then moving them between the pages of the book, using a powerful gauntlet which allows Jot to do exactly that, take control of those pages and then jump into the ones he needs to go to. And it allows for a little bit of play as well. Things like taking the word giant and then putting it where it's not needed for the quest, just because you want to see a giant frog. These are the moments I love in games. The silly stuff, the tertiary options you don't have to do, but are so often overlooked by developers. That's where the Plucky Squire really shines. In the real world, there's a lovely mixture of the hand-drawn elements of that child and the 3D perspective of the world being brought together. There are some really impressive moments here. Things that made me sit back in my seat and go, yes, that is awesome. It certainly feels like something that Nintendo could have made, and I say that as a big compliment. There are also some stealth sections. You can hold a trigger and creep around to dodge insects. I'm not a huge fan of stealth that makes you go all the way back to the start of the section when you're seen. I have to say, I think they could have come up with a slightly better solution there. And some of the platforming can be a little finicky within the 3D world. Again, there are accessibility options for auto jumps and such. And a couple of the mini games don't work as well, like trying to catch the blasted fish. What a pain that was. But you'll never be bored. Every time that page turns, you'll never know exactly what to expect. Is it going to shift to a side perspective? Are you going to find yourself in a deep dark cave? Or will you be grabbing a word and making a lily pad absolutely gigantic? When taken in isolation, all of the components of Plucky Squire are nothing necessarily new, but they're brought together expertly. It signposts brilliantly to the player, and it breaks the fourth wall in a non-irritating way. Story and gameplay were exactly what I expected. If you like what you've seen, you're going to sit with a big smile on your face from start to finish. It doesn't outstay its welcome, it has that stand by me camaraderie, and it reminds me why we play games in the first place, to escape the vagaries of life and experience something hopefully that we haven't before. Story and gameplay combined score 18 out of 20. The controls for me weren't as good, they score 16 out of 20. The Plucky Squire is a beautiful game. It's also a technical marvel. Not only does it include a full 3D environment, you've also got those 2D elements seamlessly integrated and the ability to switch between pages of the story and then jump into those. It's very clever and far beyond my capacity to understand, I have to be honest. What I do know is it looks exactly like a storybook. The audio is superb, the narrator excellent, and sure, there's a little Legend of Zelda in some of those sound effects, and perhaps a couple of cues borrowed from here and there, but when it all looks and sounds this good, I'm not going to complain.
The honey badger seemed rather annoyed.
As you've probably already noticed, frame rates are fine. They do fluctuate a little from their target 30 frames per second, but it actually performs much better than I thought it would. Obviously on other platforms you are getting 60 FPS, but visual quality on Switch is surprisingly good. It falls into around medium settings on PC, certainly better than low settings, retaining the real-time and dynamic shadows and some of the anti-aliasing. I'm actually quite surprised. When playing in handheld mode, it looks lovely. In fact, this is certainly my preferred way to play. It just feels like I'm holding a storybook. It's one of the few times where I don't have to advise you to go elsewhere. The Switch version is more than playable, and at version 1.2 on launch day clearly has had a number of patches over the last few months. It's an experience that I think benefits from being played in handheld mode. It just suits that style. It's like holding the book in your hands. While certainly you can have a better experience on the more powerful platforms, I am thankful they've managed to get it running okay on Switch. 30 frames per second is enough for me. Visuals and performance combined then, they score 18 out of 20. Sound and audio also scores 18 out of 20. The Plucky Squire will cost you $26.99. It took me about 8 hours to finish, and there is a physical available as well. Certainly you could criticize some of the gameplay decisions. There are moments where it's too linear perhaps, but then something completely off the wall will happen, or a new character will be introduced who is so endearing that you'll forget all that nonsense and just have a good time. It's a little expensive perhaps, but I think there's so much love and attention that's gone into it. The aforementioned Nintendo would certainly be charging 40, 50 quid for this. I give value 17 out of 20. The Plucky Squire is exactly the way I thought it would be. Full of quirky and unusual moments I didn't expect, and a feeling that it was made by people who genuinely love games. It gets a SwitchUp score of 87%. Thank you to our Patreons and members, all of you that enjoy the content. Let me know, is this one that you've got your eye on? Are you going to be picking it up? And once again, a big thanks to Devolver Digital for the review copy. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!